Hello everyone and welcome to PCA's Garage. I'm Vu Nguyen. I'm your host for this evening. We are watching, or you're watching, Tech Tactics Live episode 44. And today we're going to be talking about windshields. Hopefully there you go. I see that I'm sort of locked up in the photo there, but hopefully things are looking good on your end. Today we're going to be talking about windshields. It's something that every driver at some point is going to be dealing with either fixing or replacing a windshield. Before we get started, I want to make sure and I ask you to, if you enjoy the show, please hit the like button, please subscribe, and of course comment. We're bringing back the raffle for this evening. We have a sponsor, Exo Shield, that's going to be giving a kit to a PCA member for a windshield protection install. It's a $500 value, and as you can see in the photo there, it's a film that is DOT approved that can be applied to your windshield and to protect your windshield from chips and nicks, similar to what you would do for your cell phone for glass breakage. And so make sure that you put your name and where you're from in the live chat area, because we're going to be picking the winners for the Exo Shield from that list. I want to make sure we thank and happy birthday to the folks at Pirelli for making their support and making this show possible. Tonight's guest was recommended to us from our friends at Benchmark Motors. It's hard to find good people that know glass, and the gentleman that we're about to bring on, he's with W&W Auto Glass. Chris, why don't you join me over here, and we'll get started. Great to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Like I said, it's you need to know a good glass person, regardless if it's for your Porsche or your whatever daily driver you might have. What you're going to learn about tonight is going to really make you think twice about just having someone slap on a windshield and move on. You really want an expert to take care of your car. So what are we going to talk about? Let's move to the agenda. We're going to cover types of windshield damage, what damage can and cannot be repaired. Do glass manufacturers differ in quality? What tools and sealants are used? We got tons of tools on the bench here. What to look for when shopping for windshields, or more importantly, shopping for the installer that's going to repair your windshield. And then we've got a couple of photos that we're going to ask Chris to take a look at and show us how to spot some bad installs. So if you guys are all good with that, we will get started. I have my Cayenne here, and I don't know if you can switch over to Damon there, but I've got examples of some glass damage. I've got what looks to be a bullet hole in the front glass, but that was a huge rock that came off of a truck as we were coming home from Porsche Parade last year. And then I've got a little chip that we'll look at later that I got some years ago, and actually repaired that myself and using a consumer grade product. And it was in front of the passenger, so it's good. It was good enough for me, and I left it that way. For those of you that are watching online tonight, I'm monitoring all the questions, so you have questions for Chris as we go along. I'd be more than happy to share them with him. Looks like we have about 100 people with us tonight, which is awesome. So let's get started. Types of windshield damage. I know little small cracks, and I think they'll throw up some photos here in a bit. Little chips, I think if you get to them soon enough and before they become a bigger problem, like those can be repaired. You've got some that are like line cracks that go across. I'm pretty sure that means your windshield's done. And then you've got some bigger damage there. So from an installer's perspective, what are the types of damages that you look at?
So, with regard to chips, you have stars, you have the small pitting, you have clamshell breaks, you have bullseyes, and you have line fractures, and then you have fractures we consider combination fractures, which are a combination of all those, one or more. When, like you were talking about, some repairable, some not. Generally, the line cracks. Now, there are those that are going to tell you that you can fix a line crack from end to end, and that's ambitious, but not wise, because even after it's been repaired, you're going to have a scar that's left over. It might only be 50% visible, but it's still going to be this line right in your face that catches light at the different times of the day, and can be a visual distraction and thus a safety concern. So when you get into those longer lines, generally we consider those, like you said, a replacement. the insurance companies, they tend to follow a different guideline. There used to be a dollar bill, anymore, it seems to be anymore these days, any damage that's more than about the length of a credit card, they consider that to be something that's beyond the scope of repair. When it comes to getting a good result, an attractive result, something where it's going to be maybe 70 or more % less visible, generally you don't want anything on any damage that's more than about the size of maybe a quarter. So anything beyond that, and you start to get into really iffy territory with regard to how it's going to look afterwards. The scar is going to be pretty nasty.
So, and if you can go back, Robert, to that one, the line crack in the windshield. Those of us that happen to stay up late working or for whatever reason happen to have the TV running in the background, you see these like infomercials where they give you this little pin that you could kind of scrub across those lines. What is that all about? Without making too much fun of the product, because I think I know your answer.
Right. So it's you used the right word. You said gimmick.
Yeah.
A lot of the products that they sell like that, they may give you some sort of a result that you might be pleased with for a very short period of time. There's a lot of little tricks, and I like to say tricks because it's going back to the bad, I should say, stereotype of the used car salesman. There's a lot of the tricks that they'll use to get something down the line quickly, and it'll last maybe 30 days until it becomes somebody else's problem. And that's the type of thing I think you're talking about with those markers. You want to stay away from stuff like that and ideally focus on something that's going to give you your money's worth. If you're going to put money out on something, you might as well get something in return that is going to be lasting, you're going to be happy with for the long haul.
Yeah, and more than just an annoyance, there's a legality issue too. Like you were sharing, we're here in Maryland, and I think most people know if you have some sort of crack or bullet hole sort of thing in line of sight, that's, to me, obviously that would be illegal. Like where it is on my Cayenne, it's actually down just below what I thought was my line of sight. But you being in the business, you looked at that and you go, according to Maryland law, that is definitely needs to be taken care of.
So I actually reached out to one of my Maryland State Inspector friends before coming here today, just to make sure I was brushed up on that. And they have the rules can be interpreted in a couple different ways, but when it comes to critical view, they tend to focus on an area roughly about the size of a 5x8 sheet of paper right there in front of the driver. So kind of starting right at above where the wheel, you would look out over the wheel and going up from there. No, when you're talking to state police officers, I've talked to a few, and they have different rules. When it comes to when you talk to some of the state police officers, they generally say anything that starts at the masking on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, if you're talking about driver's critical view, you're talking about left-hand side, and then going from the shaded area down to about the beginning of the wiper sweep. So the rules are going to be a little bit different depending on who's looking at it, but a Maryland State Inspector, they're looking at that 5x8 area. And you kind of fall right about at the lower edge of that. So, but still, that would be considered a big fail because it is a huge hit that you have on that windshield.
Yeah, and for most of us that take good care of our car, it is an annoyance to have an imperfection that you're looking at every time you get into your car. So let's say that we've identified that we do need to repair the glass. The little ones where you can fill, is that typically covered by insurance, or how does that work?
So that really depends on your insurance company and the way your policy is written. Once upon a time, most insurance companies paid for repairs outright. It was sort of a reward for you being proactive and getting it repaired before it spread and became a replacement issue. So it was something they would just pay and look out for. Well, a few years ago, there was a great number of bad actors in certain states who were making false claims, and that kind of changed the game a little bit. So now they've gotten away from a lot of the freebies. So some insurance companies still do it, so others don't. It really depends on how your policy is written. If it's something you would want to inquire with your insurance company about.
Okay. And so what does it take for the little chip that I got on, and Damien, you're going to have to look closely because I did such an amazing job even with the consumer kit. That little chip there. There you can see it almost looks like a speck of dust right there. There you go. So, when that happened, I I think I pretty much immediately went to my local auto parts store and fixed it because my worries was that it was going to crack and be a bigger problem. How often does a little chip like that become a longer crack, and like what causes it to spread?
So there are several things that cause glass damage to spread. One would be road vibration, but the main thing we see is expansion and contraction as a result of environmental factors. Obviously, the lower down on the glass it is, where you're going to get more expansion and contraction as a result of your defrost or your heat blowing right on that area, there's going to be more likely to crack out. But again, you get those environmental factors. Let's just say that in the wintertime, it's cold outside. You get out and you got damage on your glass. You turn the heat on. I'm sure that's happened to a lot of people. They crank the heat on, and then they have that, and then there's the rapid expansion of the glass. Especially if there's ice on the outside, that pressure that's created in the glass as a result of that expansion is going to express somewhere, usually where the damage is at. You get a little chip or a break on the glass, a little star, next thing you know, right across the windshield.
Does temperature here in Maryland, actually today it was kind of warm, but for the past couple of weeks it's been in the low 20s, which I know is warm for some people, but it's pretty cold for us here in Maryland. Does temperature play a part in how chippable, or is glass more susceptible to breakage if it's cold versus when it's warm?
So you'll hear some people say that glass is a solid state liquid. It's an easy way to think of it. It's not entirely true. But yes, in the summertime, glass becomes softer, and in the wintertime, it becomes more brittle. Just because it's the nature of the product. And so when you get struck by something and it's more brittle, or if it's softer, it's more likely to spread. But that's saying the main thing we see in Maryland is those transitionary times of year. You get certain times of the year where we have 35-degree or more temperature swings over a less than a 24-hour period. Right. Where it's 60-something in the day and 20-something at night.
Today.
Exactly, right. That's extreme for glass. Glass doesn't like that. It's like people. It hates those wild temperature extremes. And so when you have wild temperature extremes like that, and those types of extremes create over a short period of time that kind of pressure in the glass as a result of the expansion and contraction. Next thing you know, so for that very reason, you get a chip in your windshield, and especially if you live in one of those wilder states, you're going to want to get it fixed before it spreads so that it's an inexpensive thing rather than a whole replacement.
Right. So let's say you do repair the little bullseye chip and you fill it in, and we'll talk about that process later. And optically it's clear. Structurally, is the glass good?
It is good. It's not obviously it's not as good as it being unbroken.
Right.
But the term that they use in the industry is cross-linking. That resin gets in there and it cross-links the damage and basically prevents it from growing or spreading. In a best-case scenario, when it cross-links, it's almost invisible. You can't see it. But those types of scenarios are rare. More often than not, the visibility. We like to use the analogy of a spider web. In the morning, when the dewdrops are on the spider web, you can see that sucker from clear across the yard. You're looking for it, it stands out. In the evening, that same spider web, if you're not paying attention, you might walk into it. But if you're looking for it, you see it. The same goes for glass damage. The crack that hasn't been fixed is that spider web in the morning that's shiny or shadowy from every angle. But in the evening, when it's been repaired, it's more like that one in the evening, where basically if you're looking at it and you're looking for it, you'll see it, but it's going to be translucent, like ghost-like, semi-transparent. It'll be, from a hard angle, it'll almost appear to disappear. That's how you know one's been properly filled. Okay.
So let's say we've now decided that we do need to repair our glass. Tell us a little bit, like obviously I could call you up and say, I need my glass repaired and just pay you, out of my pocket, so to speak. Like, is there a difference between going through your insurance company versus going through out of pocket in terms of, like, if I went through an insurance company, do I have to use their glass person, or could I still go with somebody that I know and trust or that I've learned that has a good reputation?
By law, you can use whichever glass provider you want. Now the insurance companies, basically, when you call them, a lot of them work with third-party administrators. It's another company that administrates their losses. So you think you're talking to your insurance company, but you're actually talking to another vendor for that insurance company that's handling things and helping them process things. So to answer your question, you can go use whoever you want for the repair. That there might be, anybody that you choose that's professional is going to be well versed with working with the insurance companies.
Yeah.
Now the insurance companies generally like to use somebody that's preferred and in their network. That they can make it a little difficult for you and time consuming if you use somebody that's out of the network, but you still by law have the right to use whoever you want.
Okay, good. Well, the reason why I've lived with that big old crack in front of me with this car is because I want to make sure whoever was going to do it was going to take good care and not create more damage with the vehicle. Because I've had cars in the past where it wasn't installed correctly and it became a nightmare in terms of, did it leak? Did they get the interior all gross? Did they not clean out the gutter, if I don't know the correct term, of where the windshield sits properly? Or did they get goop all over around the glass? So that's why I waited for you. You probably, for those of you watching in areas outside of Maryland, if you don't have access to Chris, and you want to ask people who have gone through it before to make sure that they treat your car right. So let's talk about, we had a question here from, a lot of our members have older cars, right? Okay. And I think glass made by Securit or something like that. That's kind of a name I remember. Glass from, let's say, the 70s, 80s, 90s even, and there's some brands right there. Has glass evolved over the years?
It has changed over the years. It's gotten, I don't want to say cheaper. It's fit the demand that it's made for, I guess is the best way I had to put it. It's gotten thinner and lighter, not stronger. Thinner and lighter because everything's is about fuel conservation and these days. So when it comes to the glass from the 60s and the 70s and those time frames, generally if you pull a glass from a car, windshield from a car back then, it's thick. I mean, it appears to be twice as thick as what you see these days. Yeah. And that kind of a thing can create some headaches with regard to installation because it throws tolerances off. We've had customers with cars that are old classic cars that they put in shows and they want it to be just so. And you supply a glass that's made to today's standards. It's a little thinner, and the rubbers that or the moldings that they make aren't made of pure rubber anymore. A lot of them are made of like neoprene rubber compounds. That the tolerances are let out, or they don't respond the same way when it comes to pushing your outer trims in. So things are a little tweaked or a little out, and people can be they can get a little peevish about that, especially if they're looking for perfection in their car. Yeah. There's ways to mitigate for that, but it's but to a certain extent, you're limited by the products that are available.
Talking about perfection, people that have had cars for a good amount of time, or maybe they've just put a lot of mileage on the car, and the glass is not chipped or cracked, but it's just starting to get a lot of pitting. So almost like sandblasted, for a lack of a better term. Is there a remedy for that, or? So, really ideal. The remedy is to replace the window, unfortunately. There are buffing machines that you can get where you can buff the glass out. The problem is that when you get into that pitting that you're talking about, it's not even. You're not every stone that's hitting your windshield is creating a pit that's the exact same depth. And in order to get scratches or pits out of the glass, you've got to remove layers of glass. And that's how the buffing machines work. Just like on clear coat, when you're buffing the clear coat, you're removing some of the clear coat.
Precisely.
Right.
You're removing layers down, and when you get beyond a certain depth, the rule that most the people that are working in that industry will, with their scratch removal anyway, is 4 1/1000ths of an inch. When you get about more than 4 1/1000ths of an inch deep, what happens with a windshield anyway is it creates a lensing effect. So you're trading one distortion for another. And so when we see scratches that are, if you can run your fingernail across the glass and it makes a clicking or a catching or scratching sort of a noise, that generally means it's more than 4 1/1000ths of an inch. And in that case, it's a new window.
Yeah. Well, I think we had one of our very first commenters tonight Burden Live has original glass on their 285,000 mile 87 Carrera. I guess it's still good glass other than the fact that it's sandblasted, and their question was, should I replace it? And I would say to you is, does that originality mean more to you than having a clear windshield, right?
It's been my experience that the reason why people are afraid of removing something that's original is because they're worried that the seal on the replacement product isn't going to be a factory seal, and as a result they're going to have problems with water.
Yeah.
But if you find somebody who takes the time to do it right, and uses the right materials, you're going to get a seal that's just as good as the factory seal. And if they use factory parts, that's going to be the same too. The difference is that you're going to have restored clarity, which is going to make your driving experience safer. Think about all that rashing that you're talking about in the pitting on that windshield. When it's sunny out and you're driving into the sun on the highway, it's dangerous without that pitting. Right. With that pitting, that's casting all those weird deflections on the glass, or when it rains and the rain catches in those grooves and creates the weird water whiteout that you can't see through. Really, is it worth it? I mean, I suppose if it's not your daily driver and you're only taking that thing out on sunny, perfect days, maybe you can live with it. But if it's a daily driver or something you drive regularly,
one thing you're not taking into consideration is the PCA factor. And what I mean is, some of us in PCA love our original equipment on our car. And I totally get it, because I'm completely guilty of that. So we go, do we have to take a sticker off of our car because it came with our car, so there's a little bit of that too.
I understand. I'm a brand loyalist in certain regards myself, so I get it. But I guess then it's a game of weights.
Yeah.
Which one means more to you?
Yeah.
Safety or your OEM parts.
Yeah. So you just mentioned brand, and we can throw up the brands again, Robert. Whoever you're going with, I'm assuming there's a number of brands of glass. In the past, I've always looked at my windshield and saw whatever brand that came with my car, and I would request the installer to, hopefully they can get me the same brand. Are the brands different?
They're very much different.
Okay.
So you have different categories of glass. We like to refer to those as original equipment production. That's the part you love so much that came in your car from the factory. It has all the original branding and logos. It has all the original stickers on it, all that stuff. Then you have OEM. Sometimes there's no distinction between OEM and OEP. We'll use the Ford product here as an example. Ford has they like to use Carlite for their glass. You can get Carlite that's made for the dealerships, all the original logos and branding, and then you can get Carlite that's made for the replacement marketplace, where it lacks all the Ford logos and brandings, but it just says Carlite on the glass. But it's off the same assembly line, so for all intents and purposes, it's an identical piece. It's just missing some of the little blurbs on or logos on the glass. Then you have original equipment equivalent. This is what most of us in the industry are going to show you, because it's where your value on the dollar is at. People that are calling in, they don't want to spend $1,000 or more on their windshield replacement if they can help it. They want something as reasonably priced as possible, and that's the OEE. OEE is generally made, it's supposed to be made to exacting standards. So it's supposed to be identical to OEM and OEP, just lacking the logos and having somebody else's brand name on it. In my experience, it's not the same as OEM and OEP. It's a little bit. It's a close third. And then you have the wide and disappointing world of aftermarket.
Yeah.
And the aftermarket industry, in the U.S. there's probably about 90 different suppliers of aftermarket glass, and only a few of them are worth a hill of beans.
Really?
The aftermarket product is allowed to have greater variances in its tolerance. So you'll notice that the glass may have ripples and waves in it as part of shaping in the autoclaving process. You'll see where there might be minor distortions, which it's allowed to have as long as they're not in the critical view. You'll notice that when you're driving down the highway, the lines that come at you may appear to kick out in a weird way across the bottom of the glass because, again, the curvature is not precise. Rather than being, say, within about 2 mil, it's off by about 6, which is drastic.
Wow.
And that brings me to another point. In today's day, it's hard to get a car that's newer that doesn't have all kind of gizmos and gadgets on it. Starting at about 2015, really, just about everything seems to come with lane departure warning systems and adaptive cruise controls and forward collision alerts. That's all controlled by a fancy camera that's attached to your windshield. That camera has to be able to see just so. If you use an aftermarket part with curvatures that are a little bit off, it can be difficult or impossible to calibrate those systems. So if you have those gizmos and gadgets on your car, the fancy cameras, OEM or OEP is the only way to go. Because otherwise you might spend all kinds of money on a windshield only to find out that it can't be properly calibrated. Next thing you know, your lane departure warning system is not alerting you correctly, or your lane keep assist is yanking you off the highway.
So as a consumer going to your insurance company, let's say, to make the claim, like, who determines that? Are you able to request, I only want OEM, I only want OEM quality, I definitely don't want aftermarket?
So the insurance companies, your typical insurance company policy is not going to cover for OEM parts. The insurance companies generally have the rule of thumb where if the car is less than 1 year of age, they will pay for factory parts without too much of a fuss. All you have to do is request it, as long as it is less than a year old. As soon as you get over a year old, then you have to have a policy rider added to your policy that states that you are covered for factory parts replacement if you want it. Most people don't realize that that's a thing, and your insurance company likely isn't going to say anything about it. But I'm sure it just skips their mind. But if you want factory parts and not have the insult upon injury of having aftermarket components put in your car in an accident, then call and have that added. From what we've seen, it generally, if you have it only added to your comprehensive side, incidents and accidents that aren't your fault, rocks off the highway, deer strikes, tree branches, that sort of thing, it usually only seems to add somewhere about $8 and $13 extra a month to your policy. So, a little over $100 a year, and you can have factory parts when something happens to your car. A comprehensive loss.
Comprehensive
anyway.
wise.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just got a note, man. Time's flying. It's already 8:27. We have the winners for the raffle. So congratulations to Mark Herman. You've won the ExoShield installation. Make sure you reach out to either Manny or Damon online, and we'll hook you up there. And Kurt Dobrins, Kurt from the Diablo region. I know Kurt very well. Kurt, we will get you this good-looking Pirelli ball cap for you to sport when I see you at Works Reunion later this year. So we have a whole host of tools here. Let's go through and share with folks your tools of the trade.
Very good. All right. Just like any trade, we have a host of specialized tools and components that are trade specific, that allow us to get the job done and get it done with a good result. So let's see here. This one here is called an extractor. Extractor is more or less a kind of a universal term that's applied to it. There are many different versions of this now, brands of it. The first one that we saw in the industry was made by a company called Extractor, and so that term is now kind of carried forward to apply to all of them, kind of like Xerox or Kleenex. We use this tool predominantly to remove to cut through the urethane at the base of the windshield. It's basically a Sawzall that's had the reciprocating action taken out of it. So instead of cutting like this, it just cuts straight in and out, and it allows us to release the urethane at the bottom.
Something I didn't know before you go on to the next tool.
Of course, yeah.
So the way the windshield sits on our car, it's obviously sitting in urethane, and the urethane is what is between the glass and the frame of the car. And when you're cutting, or when you're removing the windshield, and when you're reinstalling the windshield, I didn't realize until you told me tonight that you were kind of cutting in the area of the urethane because you don't want to cut below the urethane and possibly scratch or mess up the paint or the primer or whatever it is underneath the urethane. You're just trying to stay in the middle, is that correct?
So you're trying to cut the old urethane down to somewhere between 1 and 3 millimeters of thickness.
But never go past it.
Ideally,
Ideally,
it's not to go past it. As long as after you've cut the urethane off, you still have some urethane left. Urethane sticks best to urethane. So as long as you have some left on the pinch weld, or looking all the way around, then that's the best case scenario.
So I was surprised because I thought you would take the windshield out and then remove all of the old urethane and then put new urethane, but that is not the case.
That's not the case. The only time we really see anything like that is in a conversion. And when I'm talking about conversions, is a lot of your older cars used butyl sealants and tape kits as the seal. They didn't have nearly the crash test rating as the urethanes that we use today have. And so the old butyls, if somebody is trying to convert from that over to urethane, because the old butyl systems, you can still use them, but technically they're not street legal. If you're taking something and you want it to be a daily driver more than a certain number of miles a year, you would want to take and convert. You want to remove the butyl all the way down to the paint system, so that you got a fresh start, and then build up so that you can switch over to a urethane system.
Okay, so just want to make that point because I didn't know that until today. So continue on with your tools.
Sure, of course. You were talking about a minute ago the cutting things down. This here is we nicknamed it the shark, because when we first started using these many years ago, it seemed like it bit one of us daily. But it basically it's a tool that has basically a.
So it's like a smaller version of that.
Kinda.
Yeah.
It's like like an X-Acto blade, a hobby knife type of a blade. There are many different versions of it, and they come in different widths. But when you hold this and you hold it down to the body, and you keep the beveled side towards the body, it's after some practice, it's pretty easy to control your height with regard to your cut, and leave a nice deck of urethane, about 1 to 3
well,
millimeters.
You must be pretty good, because I'm looking at your hands and I don't notice many scars.
No, that, and we use proper protection when we're working with our tools.
Okay, gotcha.
So when we're on a job site, generally, if you're working with anything chemical, you're going to have nitrile gloves on. If you're working with your cutout tools, you're going to have like a leather or a cloth, fabric kind of mechanics glove on, something like that. And then it also helps to be
very careful.
Very careful. Yeah.
All right, so this looks to me here like a sealant dispensing tool.
So this here is a battery-operated caulking gun. The caulking that we use, the basically urethane retention system is the fancy name for it. Is the sealant that creates the seal for your windshield and holds everything in, and that stuff is thick. It is so thick that you'd have to have some Popeye the Sailor Man forearms in order to get it out of the tube.
I thought that was more just for uniformity, but it's actually because it takes a lot of pressure to get it out of there.
Uniformity and pressure.
Yeah.
The reason this stuff comes so it's so thick that if you were pumping, I'm not saying you couldn't do it, but it has about a 12-minute to skin time and an 8-minute open time.
Oh, wow.
So you'd have to be able to pump this all the way around the windshield, and it takes an average of 2 tubes per windshield. You have to be able to pump 2 tubes all the way around the windshield and do so and get the glass into that in about 8 minutes. Or you would be setting yourself up for leaks.
Oh my. Okay, I didn't realize that.
So what this gun does is it allows us to pump that out, and not just pump it out uniformly, like you said, but evenly, so that ideally when you're running your urethane, you want to run your urethane into a V bead. That way, as the glass touches the V bead, it collapses and pushes all the air out of it, and you got a nice seal. Well, a lot of times we see guys that will just run a round bead, and then, I mean, if you think about it, you don't have a whole lot of surface area grabbing the glass, and that can set you up for leaks.
Okay.
So
like, quick question for you: for those of us that drive older cars, older 911s that have like the big trim piece around it, is there sealant in that, or is it just the trim piece that's holding the glass in and keeping it sealed?
In those older style gasket set,
that's what I'm thinking.
the gasket set windshields, there are different types of gasket set windshields. Some Some are gaskets that use a locking strip that is also made out of a rubberized sort of a material. Others are self-locking, where they've got a tab that's part of the molding that folds in. And still others have trims, metal trims, that are designed to create the pressure in there to hold it. And in some instances, the fit is so tight that the gasket and locking strip by itself creates the seal. In others, the Ford Mustang is a prime example here, where you can have that in there perfectly, and it's going to leak like a sieve from the corners if you don't use some sort of a sealant. And the sealant that we use is called bedding and glazing compound, or windshield and body sealant. It is a sealant that comes out of the tube runny and hardens to a consistency of about like a saltwater taffy. And think of it like kind of like a Tootsie Roll on a hot day. It hardens up to about that consistency, and so it allows you to run that around between the gasket and the glass, and around the outer edge of the gasket, and then it settles in until all the holes and little openings fills everything and makes it so that it makes for a watertight system.
Okay, cool. All right, so what are you've got some more stuff here?
Sure. So what we have here. In the industry, we call these cold knives or cable knives, and these are the knives we use generally for cutting out the top and the sides of a windshield or back glass. They allow us to blade chase, and when I say blade chase, I mean you start with a small size and gradually work your way up to bigger and bigger size blades. So that you're not putting a whole lot of force, one, on your poor body, but two, on the car itself. The more force that you put on, go ahead.
So is it just because I'm curious, I'm very visual.
Sure.
So if this was a piece of glass, are you kind of going in like this and cutting it like that?
Exactly.
Okay.
So let's just say that's your windshield here, and you generally you're going to have a spot where you're going to be able to get in there carefully and get in around the glass edge without digging into the paint. Yeah. And then you would get this behind there, hold it as tight to the glass edge as you possibly can, so that it doesn't twist or wander or drift into the paint and create scratches. Right. And then one hand controls the blade and the angle of the blade for optimal cutting, and then the other is pulling the blade along. So you're not pulling with this side, you're just pulling with the cable and controlling the blade with this hand. And that allows you to get a good cut. We like to use serrated blades because with the increased surface area, it makes for a smoother cut.
And you're trying to put as much pressure up against the glass and staying away from the paint.
Exactly.
And
because you're going to find that urethane, which has a 150 mile per hour crash test rating, is no joke, especially in the wintertime. It's some solid stuff. Okay. And when you're trying to cut through that, this blade is going to want to wander. It's going to want to twist. And in some of the vehicles with lower tolerances, a slight twist is all it takes to scratch the paint.
Yeah, and that's where you definitely want someone that's good doing it, that's going to take their time and treat your car like it was their own, because there's some outfits out there, it's all about volume, and they're going into your car with a knife and just scraping, and I'm sure they could put it all back together, and by the time rust sets in and all the other bad stuff that might happen from improperly cutting out a window, they're long gone.
We've seen some pretty extreme examples of that kind of thing where speed was clearly the focus and not they put the speed over quality, and it rarely ends well.
Okay. Well, I know we have more to talk about, but I want to make sure we get through the agenda. So just real quickly, this is a suction cup to hold the glass?
Yep. There are many different types with different handle grips on them, but this is one of the oldest school and main ones you'll see in the industry. It's an old Woods suction cup. Each one's good for about 70 pounds. In my opinion, when you're having your glass set, ideally you want to have it set by two people. You'll see a lot of the companies that are out here, and they're using these technologies that allow one guy to do it. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm not saying you can't get a good job, but in my opinion, it's more difficult to get an even set. Those swing technologies, when you come around the glass, first off you got to. It takes a little bit of time to get that thing set up, and then once you get it swung around, Time is not really the factor there, but once you get it swung around, you have to drop a pin on those things usually to get them set, and that means that you're shifting the glass while it's in the glue, which is, in my opinion, not a good idea.
Not a good idea.
Right, you're setting yourself up for two things: A, leaks as a result of shifting the glue, and B, having the glue ooze out over your A-pillars or your past your headliner or wherever. So it's the guys have been doing it a long time. I've seen some guys that can pull it off and it looks good.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to get that nice even into the V-bead set with as few issues as possible, two guys is really the way to go. Yeah, it's a lot safer for the car and the people.
Okay, so real quickly, this is a cool tool as well, because I've always kind of envisioned, or I've seen people where almost like they take floss in between and shove it through and then just kind of trim it all out. And this is a tool that you use kind of similar in
So
design.
this is called an equalizer Viper. There's a few different versions of this tool out there. It's a wire cutout tool. And what it does is these are the types of tools, these wire cutout tools are great to use when you want to be able to cut the windshield out and have the best shot at having little or zero damage to the car. I've seen some examples where they're improperly used and expediently used, and extreme damage was done to cars where they used a wire instead of a
nylon.
Right, exactly. And then in the most extreme examples that I've heard of, there was one specific company I heard had done a number of cars for a used car company, and they literally cut the lower fin off of the bottom of the pinch weld.
Oh.
And it was a big deal.
Yeah.
But these allow you to basically get into your areas of super tight tolerance. A lot of the cars these days, and you get behind the windshield. Basically, if that's their windshield again, you would push the wire from the inside along the glass carefully, penetrating the urethane, pushing this wire out, and then you would pull this out, so you have to have enough to get all the way around the windshield, carefully thread it around the windshield, making sure to avoid all the obstacles, because it's easy to overlook something like that fin we just talked about. And then after you get it all the way around the windshield, then you would use a tool to go through and pull back through, and then one end of the wire would connect to your suction cup that's mounted to the glass. One end would mount to a keeper so that you can get your tension. It's also suction cups to the glass. And then basically, once you have it all together, this would go down on top of there and allows you to tighten and tighten and tighten until it constricts that wire.
And when you're tightening, it constricts it and then it drags it across.
Drags it through the urethane. And severs it right perfectly along. And it looks, when you see it in action and it's working right, it's a thing of beauty.
Well, when you showed this to me, I thought it was pretty cool. All right, so we need to make up some time here. So we talked about the sealants, we talked about the tools. Let's just talk a little bit about pro versus consumer repair kits. Like obviously, I went to my auto parts store and did, the best that I could do with the repairs. And I've also had some bullet holes done by a professional, and it's clearly a different level of repair. What's the difference between the two?
So the kits that they sell in the store, they generally use an adhesive tape or double-sided sticky tape to bond the injector or an assembly to the glass, which is, from what I've seen, not super effective. It doesn't allow you to get a long and lasting bond to the glass. It doesn't allow you to apply the pressure and create the vacuum that you need to create in order to extract all the air. When you have an effective repair, all of the air in the damage has been removed and replaced with resin. So that when that resin is cured and cross-linked, there is no void that can experience undue expansion and contraction at some other rate. There's no, or create a visual spot in the glass that's more annoying than it has to be. So another thing about those kits is that they use resins that are not pro-grade. There are different grades of resin. There are a lot of those kits they sell in the store. The resins that they use over time, it's a lot of time, usually like a year or more, I'd say like a year or two, they'll turn yellow and then amber in the glass, and whereas the professional grade resins won't do that.
Yeah, and the cure time too, and because of the different qualities of resin of a consumer grade versus a pro grade, I definitely noticed. When I did mine, you have to set it and you do your best, and it sits there for like 6 hours. And when I've done it with a pro, that you can be in and out of there quickly because they actually use a UV light.
That's correct.
To activate and harden the resin, and as soon as it's hard, they're like done.
The resins that the pros use, they have a catalyst in the resin that reacts to an absence of oxygen and a presence of UV light. So in that way, it's very much like the resins that the dentists use to fix your teeth. Matter of fact, the drill bits that we use when we're doing repair work and we drill, which we try not to, it's the same thing. They're dental drill bits. But that resin, when you put the Mylar, like you just showed in that picture, over the resin and then expose it to UV light, that Mylar is there to remove oxygen from the equation. And then with the oxygen gone and the UV light on it, it can cure in about 6 minutes as opposed to 6 hours.
Right. All right. Well, I figured the next part of our show, talking about what to look for in windshields and installers. I figured we'd do it by the car, because that way we can show things that you're looking at, things to be aware of, and this is what you should hope your installer is looking after. So why don't we make our way around there? I'm going to adjust the camera so that we get a better shot. Hopefully I do a good job adjusting this camera for Robert. Let me see here. Okay, hopefully I did a good job for you there, Robert. All right, so one of the things that I really worry about when someone's working on my car, one is just don't scratch my paint. Leaning over the car, there's different parts that you're gonna have to take off. Don't crack, these plastic pieces, and I just want someone to be very careful. So this car doesn't seem to me to have any kind of gasket like an older car. This just sits on top and it goes from glass directly to paint. What's that called?
So that's that exposed edge we were talking about before, where it goes right to. But yours actually does have a molding.
Oh, I do?
It is. If you,
oh yeah.
You see it?
Yeah.
That is a U-lip molding. So basically, it's a little molding that attaches to the back edge of the glass, and when the glass lays into the body, that molding goes like this.
Oh, okay.
And creates that little seal, that little weather strip seal. And when you see those across the top, usually they serve two purposes. One, cosmetic, and two, they're basically trying to help prevent filth and grime from building up behind there. That's about it. Sometimes with side moldings like yours, if you'll notice, your side moldings here have a gap between them. That's called a rain channel. Okay. And that's designed so that when your vehicle wiper blades are working, their wiper blades aren't flicking the water off the sides all over everything. You got something to catch it and channel the water down.
Okay. Now is that gap set, or is it set because of the trim piece, or
this will be set because of the trim piece? You're going to have a series of clips that go up the side of this trim piece here that hold this on, and so when this is fully seated in, it's set by the clip. Usually those kind of clips are pin set or riveted to the body, so their location or their position is what it is. Yeah. There are some moldings that are that for side moldings that are installed by the installer. Like a good example would be like. One we did recently, it would have been Toyota Tacomas, where they have a top molding that's a U-lip set by at the factory a lot of the time, but then the side moldings are attached by us, and they have it's a bulky side molding that has the same kind of a rain channel profile as these. So
a question someone asked earlier was, I've had my windshield replaced, and then there was a whistling noise afterwards. And I didn't understand how that could be, but you explained it to me. Why don't you share it with our folks that are watching?
So that whistling noise that you're hearing is a lot of times when you take the windshield out, that it is set to a specific height or a deck. And it's done that way for a number of reasons. But one of those is that when the wind is traveling across the car, you don't want to have a wind tearing or a buffeting noise. If you get a windshield and it's not pressed in far enough, you can get a wind drag across the top edge, and that can create a tearing noise. Or if it's set too deep, let's just say we see this a lot, where the windshield is set with foam. It's foam dams. That set the deck height so that when you press the glass in, it stops at say a 1/4 inch, whatever, 3/16, whatever. And so if you strip those out, when you strip your urethane out and you don't replace those, then when you're pressing the glass in, it's easy to push it in too far. And if you push it in too far, then you can end up with more body than glass. And again, you've got another surface edge that instead of creating that wind tearing noise, it's a wind buffeting noise, and it can sound like a thrumming or a humming or like I'm sure you've heard it before, a weird wind, that kind of a wind dragging noise.
So this car doesn't have too many electronic gizmos, but it still has some sort of eye there. I think that's the rain sensor.
That's exactly what that is.
Okay. Tell me about how important it is for an installer to know what they're doing with that.
So it is important. The rain sensors, what they do is instead of you controlling your rain sensor function from a speed controlling dial, your dial just controls sensitivity, and that sensor controls the function. So when it senses rain, it speeds up or slows down the wipers based on how much rain is hitting the windshield. The main thing we see when we're going behind other companies from time to time is that they'll have not changed out the rain sensor adhesive.
This is the black part here?
So you see that milky sort of a semi-translucent?
Yeah.
That is that's a sealant.
Oh.
It's a silicone style sealant that makes it so that your rain sensor lens or eye can see clearly. Without that there, dust and air and other things can be trapped in there, and then your rain sensor can see that and think that that's rain. And so you'll be going down the road and your wipers are intermittently going off for no reason at all.
So that area is actually filled with something.
Yes.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
And so if you have a rain sensor, then it's important that that rain sensor adhesive be replaced, and that's going to be an additional cost. Usually, most companies are going to charge you somewhere in the neighborhood of about $30 for a standard lens, or more for something more involved. Yours is a little more involved because it takes a thicker, more expensive type of rain sensor or silicone.
Yeah. Someone had a question earlier. They had a glass replaced on their Ram truck, and then they have a glass that needs to be replaced on a Porsche. Why the price difference?
Well, I mean, aside from the fact that the Porsche is considered to be a luxury brand and priced accordingly.
The Porsche tax.
That's you're going to get that when you get into a luxury automobile. Unfortunately, if when you buy something that's luxury, you get the repair costs that go along with it.
But is it harder to do? I mean, I know like when we work on our cars, there's like fit and finish and stuff like that, like on an interior door panel on a Porsche. Taking that apart is much harder than taking apart a Toyota Corolla door panel. And so I can understand why I pay more labor, time, whatever to do that. Is that the case with the windshield?
In some cases, yes, and in some cases, no. I wish that was universal.
Okay.
Like for instance, I personally find we did a Maserati Gran Turismo recently. And that windshield, you would think going into it, luxury brand, you're expecting it to be troublesome, but it was ridiculously easy compared to a Ram 15 or 2500. It's just everything. It
depends.
Right. In that particular instance, it seemed like everything was laid out by the engineer to be just easy to do, and that is another thing we see with the luxury brands, the higher end luxury brands. A lot of times they are set up that way because they know that they want those repairs to be brought in-house to the dealerships. Whereas with a lot of your domestics and midline luxury cars, there are very few, if any, dealerships that have their own in-house glass guys. They all have relationships with somebody like us. So you call your dealership for a price, and your dealership is going to, they'll quote you, and they'll have you drop it off for the day, and then they're going to have whoever they have a relationship with come out and handle it.
So for our viewers, are there a couple of tips that you can share with them in finding or when looking for a good installer?
So the first would be obviously in today's day and age, everybody uses the internet search engines.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's easy to trick review results. There's a whole companies that the reputation defenders, that's their job, is to scrub and polish people's public image. But they generally don't take the time to leave lengthy reviews where their specific instances are in there and names are dropped. Yeah, so when you're looking for somebody that look at the reviews and see how if they've got a lot of lengthy, long, good reviews where it looks like people have taken the time to really say good things about them. Ask around, talk to friends and family.
Do like what I did.
Yeah, exactly.
Ask our local
around.
service place.
And you're going to find when you ask around, eventually you'll find somebody who likes somebody specific. And then on top of that, ask the questions. When you call them, ask them questions such as ask about the glass. If they come at you and you ask for a price and they throw it out at you instantaneously, especially if it's something newer. On newer vehicles, I mean, we'll use the Jeep Cherokee as an example. There are 50 different windshields that they make for the Jeep Cherokee in
50? 50?
50. Every combination of features that they offer for that vehicle on a windshield is a different part number. So they offer a lane departure warning system. They offer adaptive cruise control, heating of the heated wiper park area, rain sensor, condensation sensor, which controls the AC on the inside and automatically defrosts the same thing does the same thing for the inside that the rain sensor does for the outside. Different types of logos: Willys logo on the left, Willys logo on the right, Willys logo in the center. There's different. Every combination of those features is a different part number. So when you call, if they just throw you a price out instantaneously, you should be suspicious. You should be suspicious because that's somebody who's just either they're looking at the most expensive thing and quoting you that, and then they'll figure it out, which is going to equate to a waste of time for you. It's nothing worse than getting out onto a job site and discovering you have the wrong thing.
Oh yeah.
We mitigate that.
You waste everybody's time.
It does. It stinks.
Yeah.
So what we try to do is, if you've got FaceTime, we'll look at your car right through your phone to figure it out. If you don't, then what we'll do is we'll work with you to get your VIN decoded. It's best to have it done by a dealership because a lot of aftermarket VIN decoding programs don't dig down to the level that the dealership VIN decoders do. And it'll tell you specifically what your part number is. With that, you can cross-reference through whichever reporting system you use. We use Mitchell Glassmate, which is basically they set the price guidelines and work with the insurance company to set labor hours and whatnot. We can cross-reference your factory part number to get a glass ordering number, and that way we know when we come out we are apples to apples on what you need. And so when you're calling around, ask. Find out, okay, are you sure that's the part that I need? Or what part do you intend to put in? What's the brand? If you're, are you putting in a factory window? Or are you putting in an original equipment equivalent window? Or are you putting in some aftermarket one? Is it if you are comfortable with aftermarket for whatever reason, which is, it's what's in some people's budget, so I get it. If you're comfortable with that, what brand of aftermarket is it going to be? Is it one that's known to have issues or problems? Are you putting things back in to the exact way that it was from the factory? i.e., are you replacing the spacers or the foam dams or the rain sensor gels or whatever other?
And if they don't know what you're talking about, then you should go to the next shop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Do your homework.
So the option actually for my windshield that you mentioned that I didn't even know existed, we'll walk our way back here, but you asked if my windshield was solar coated.
So some vehicles, not all, chiefly we see it with a lot of the European ones like Porsche and Mercedes and BMW. They'll offer an option where you can get the glass solar coated. It's usually on the higher trim levels. It would come with it from the factory, but it's an option if you wanted to upgrade when you're replacing the windshield. And what the solar coating is it's very similar to having like the crystalline window film and say like a 90% transmissivity already on the glass right from the factory. It's
built into the glass.
It's built into the glass, and it's a coating that reduces your the UVA and UVB penetration by high 80s to low 90s percentages. So it protects the interior of the car, slows fade and degradation of the components on the inside and the plastics, and protects you as the driver from the harmful rays of the sun as well.
So with that, understanding that, I think when we replace the windshield on this one, I'm going to opt for that upgrade.
I couldn't blame you.
Well, we're already at the top of the hour. I want to mention a couple of announcements. Tech Tactics Live, February 23rd. We're going to have Nathan Mers back with us talking about the state of the Porsche market. For those of you that are thinking about joining us at the Treffen Broadmoor, February 16th, registration opens at 3 p.m. Pacific. Registration for Works Reunion Amelia Island. I think I'm wearing Amelia Island gear here. Registration to be judged and corral is actually sold out, but we welcome you to come as a spectator. We have parking for spectators. Come out and join us. And finally, the PCA podcast, we're still going strong. We just recorded our 8th episode. I'm sorry, we just recorded our 9th episode. The 8th episode dropped recently. 9th one should be out on maybe Monday or Tuesday of next week. So please take a listen to the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like, subscribe, comment. I want to thank Chris so much for coming out and sharing all of your wisdom and knowledge on windshields. I want to thank the folks at ExoShield for the great prize. Again, if you're looking for something to put on your windshield to prevent these chips, check them out. They'll protect your windshield, so that way you might not have to do all the work that Chris is doing. And with that, everyone stay safe, and we'll check you next time.